Hi, welcome to Give Me the Bible, where God's Word speaks for itself. In continuing our discussion of how media affects us and our need to really be careful and to be holy in our choices for what media we want to watch or we want to listen to, a good thing that we need to do is challenge ourselves to care more about what God thinks than about what other people think. Now, that's just a very basic principle, a very simple principle. It makes perfect sense. Jesus even gives this principle in Matthew chapter 10. And keep in mind, in context here, the context is very different than media choices, okay, in Matthew chapter 10. So I'm not necessarily using this to directly apply to media choices, but I will indirectly apply it because the principle holds true. He's sending his disciples out on the limited commission to the Jewish nation, and he warns them that they're going to be persecuted and they're going to have people who hate them and who mistreat them. And what he does is he says, listen, don't be afraid of them, right? Don't be afraid of them because all they can do is kill your physical body. You need to be afraid of God. Fear him because he can kill both your physical body and your spiritual body, your soul in hell. He says in Matthew 10 and verse 28, do not fear those who kill the body but are unable to kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Well, now that we know what that means in its original context, what it would have that its original here is, we can then make application of that principle here today too, because we're not talking about being afraid of people killing us, but we are talking in this instance about being afraid of what people will think about us. And I think this comes up a lot when we're talking about media choices, and unfortunately I can speak from my own personal experience where maybe you watch a movie and then you think about recommending it to somebody and you're kind of hesitant to do that. You're like, well, I don't know if I should tell these people that I actually watched that movie. Or maybe you've got the Netflix instant streaming thing and you're worried about, well, what's going to happen if, one of my Christian brothers or sisters comes over to the house, or even one of the elders of the congregation comes over to my house and they're looking at the recently watched history on my Netflix, iTunes, Apple TV box. Or what are they going to see? And if I'm worried about that, why am I worried about that? Well, can I suggest that if I'm worried about what other people are going to think about the movies that I'm watching and they're going to think that they're inappropriate, shouldn't I be concerned that God thinks that that's inappropriate? Shouldn't I be caring what he thinks about what I'm watching? And so often that's the case. I mean, I've even had some occasions where I'd be in Blockbuster back when they were still open, but would be in Blockbuster trying to decide what to watch, and I had an elder and his family coming over to watch a movie with me, and I would see a movie and I'd think, oh, that the elder might think that this is a little bit off color. I'll just wait and I'll watch that later by myself. Let me get a different movie that won't be so offensive to the elder who's coming over. Well, again, there's that false thinking. I'm caring so much more about what the elder thinks. Guess what? If the elder of the church thinks that movie is offensive or sinful, what do we think that God thinks? And we so often do those things. Where we would watch a movie and be perfectly fine watching that movie, but if the preacher was sitting next to us watching that movie, then we're all uptight and we're nervous and we're like, oh, I don't feel comfortable about this. Maybe we shouldn't be watching this. Let me put on a family movie. Why don't we do that by ourselves anyway? And part of the way to improve our media choices is to just ask this question: can we thank God for it? Can I thank God for the movie that I just watched, or the movie that I'm watching currently? Would Jesus Christ himself be okay with coming over, sitting on my couch with me and watching this movie? Because we need to ask that question, since he really is there, okay? He may not be there physically, but he is there with us. And if we're watching this, what does Jesus think of it? Is it a movie that is good? Does it have a good message? Or is there all kinds of filth in it? We'll talk a little bit more about why the media is so problematic when it comes to sin and what the media really does to sin. And we'll talk about that in the next video. But I hope that this video is clear and getting us to challenge ourselves to think a little more highly and a little more like people who are holy Right? Think holy. Okay? Is God pleased with what I'm watching? He's the one that we need to be asking that question. Does this meet God's standard? Not does this meet mine? Or does this meet the elder at a church? I hope that that's helpful, and Lord willing, I'll see you next time.